It was discovered in 1606 by Dutch navigator Willem Janszoon, and even 400 years later, in our age of affordable air flights and the internet, there are a decent number of people who don't believe in its existence. And one can understand them. This place is very, very far away. It's very private and isolated. You have to go through a strict security check to get there. The list of things you can't take with you is daunting. Any animals, food, plants, and products made from them must be declared and submitted to quarantine control, as if this was customs on some other planet. But it's not another planet. This is Australia. Australia is too weird. No wonder curious people have questions. Why doesn't anyone live in the central part of the continent? Why is the whole country crisscrossed by strange fences spanning for thousands of kilometers? Why are there an incredible number of prohibited areas? What the hell is going on there? In this video, we are going to ask these and other questions and answer them. What mysteries are hidden in Australia? Please press the thumbs up button to show your support. And remember, likes are not just a beautiful number. They send a signal to YouTube that we create high-quality content and deserve more attention. We will start our journey through the mysteries of Australia with something that is not really a mystery, but still amazes and delights. The southern continent gave birth to one natural phenomenon, which we would expect somewhere on another planet, or better, in a parallel universe with different laws of physics. How about horizontal falls? To avoid misleading you, we should say at once that these are not really waterfalls in the usual meaning. It is rather a bizarre effect which can be named so. At a certain angle, it seems that these are real waterfalls, which violate the law of universal gravity. They do not fall downward, but sideward. Despite the fact their height is only about 5 meters, their beauty is not inferior to the most picturesque waterfalls in the world. Why are the falls horizontal? The reason is the geological features of the region, which created this incredible natural effect. Two elongated freshwater bodies of water, Polton Creek, are separated from Talbot Bay by the small McLarty mountain ranges, and the two gorges are formed in these ranges. The North Gorge is located directly on the border with the Sea Bay and is about 20 meters wide. The second, the Southern Gorge, connects the water bodies of Polton Creek. It is no more than 10 meters wide. The gorges are about 300 meters apart. The effect of horizontal falls appears during high and low tides. When the seawater arrives or recedes, it simply does not have time to pass through the narrow channels. Water accumulates in front of the gorges faster than it can flow through them. This creates a difference in water level between the bay and Polton Creek and creates a waterfall effect. Typically, the difference in height is about 5 meters, but it can be as much as 10 meters. Naturally, the water rushes out of the bay at high tide and then back in at low tide. However, unlike classic waterfalls, this natural phenomenon occurs horizontally, creating the illusion that the water spills over the surface of the bay. Horizontal falls feature repeated changes in the direction of water flow during the day. That is, during one day, you can see the water flowing loudly into the bay and back out. The change in directions occurs approximately every 6.5 hours. Although Australia's horizontal falls are certainly no match for giants such as Niagara Falls or Victoria Falls, David Attenborough, one of the most famous naturalists in the world, having studied this natural phenomenon, called it one of the greatest natural wonders in the world. As amazing as these natural phenomena are, in Australia lurks something much more fascinating. Now, here's where you need to brace yourself. Because this something didn't just appear on Earth by itself. It came from outer space. No, unfortunately or fortunately, it's not about alien ships. But it won't get boring, believe me. Many of the meteorite craters on our planet were discovered quite belatedly, and even accidentally. This is because erosion, or many generations of vegetation, have erased them from the surface of the Earth over many years. And first, they were often discovered not by specialized scientists dealing with the subject, but by anyone. For example, someone very observant accidentally noticed excessively regular outlines of terrain elements on satellite images. In the case of Wolfe Creek crater, there were no accidental discoveries, and its existence was known long ago, even to the Australian Aborigines. That's because it's so obvious. The famous Arizona crater is considered most distinctly visible in the world. So, Wolfe Creek crater is considered the second in this conditional rating of obviousness. It too, like the Arizona crater, is fortunate with the climate. Thanks to the aridity of these places, it is rather poorly affected by erosion. Its diameter is about 880 meters, and in its center grow large trees that draw moisture from the water reserves remaining after the wet season. What happened here, and when? According to some reports, about 300,000 years ago, a space guest of about 15 meters, 49 feet, crashed into this place. That doesn't seem like much, but it was definitely an iron meteorite, and its mass was more than impressive. About 5,000 tons. Multiply that mass by the breakneck speed of arrival, and you get the gigantic energy that was released in fractions of a second. About 540 kilotons is the equivalent of 36 atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima. Parts of the meteoroid simply vaporized upon impact, and the other part melted, mixed with molten rock. And these pieces of mixed molten mass were scattered over the surrounding area and slopes of the rapidly forming crater. Well-preserved meteorite fragments are rare and were first described only in 1965, but numerous oxidized remnants were found. These are the pieces of the mixed molten mass. As the whole thing flew high into the air, the molten fragments took on a rounded shape as they fell back. Such shale balls weighed up to 250 kilograms, 550 pounds. Now, Wolfe Creek crater is certainly a tourist attraction. It can be reached via Tanami Road, 150 kilometers, 93 miles south of the town of Halls Creek. In 2019, the age of the crater was revised after research conducted by researchers from the University of Portsmouth in collaboration with Australian and American scientists. It is likely that this event occurred much earlier, less than 120,000 years ago. Local Jaru Aborigines called the crater Kandimalal, and of course it is a sacred place for them, with many legends that have been passed down from generation to generation. Wolfe Creek crater is nice for the fact that it completely lies in the field of view if you stand on its edge. That's what makes it so impressive, just like the Arizona crater. When the size of the crater is tens of kilometers, you can only see it from a height. And Australia has one such place, which gives us a unique opportunity to observe the bizarre shapes of the impact site of a huge celestial body from both a height and from the ground at a distance. That's where we're going now. The Gosses Bluff crater is located in the south of the Northern Territory, near the geographical center of Australia, about 175 kilometers, 109 miles west of Alice Springs, and about 212 kilometers, 132 miles northeast of the famous Uluru, or Ayers Rock Formation. By the way, we'll stop by to visit it too a bit later when we take a tour through Australia's restricted areas. Yes, there are plenty of such mysterious places on the southern continent. So this crater is much older than Wolfe Creek. More than 140 million years ago, in the early Cretaceous period, This place was hit not by a meteorite, but by an asteroid or comet. The impact was of such tremendous force that the original crater was about 22 kilometers, 14 miles in diameter. Over this gigantic span of time, it no longer had any chance of retaining its original shape. It is now a crater-like object, 5 kilometers, 3.1 miles in diameter, and 180 meters, 590 feet high. Erosion has literally eroded its original boundaries, leaving only a shattered relic of the crater's central uplift. It looks like a cluster of cone-shaped rocks with a regular rounded shape. Here's how this place looks from space. If you use your imagination, you can easily picture a certain conditional skeleton of the original crater. Only the hardest parts of the crater have remained, which erosion could not cope with. This is what it looks like from the north, from a distance of about 30 kilometers, 19 miles. It's as if these rocks grew out of the ground by themselves, or as if there were ruins of some huge building of unknown ancient civilization, like a maxed-out Stonehenge. Interestingly enough, in the middle of the last century, these places were actively explored for oil. But at that time, geologists had no idea about the true nature of this amazing place. There are still 2 exploration wells not far from the center. But as picturesque as the Gosses Bluff crater is, there is another crater in Australia which deserves not only a detailed description, but a whole poem, because its emergence is probably associated with one of the most momentous events in the history of our planet and all life on it. When scientists discovered the role of this event, many were literally numb with awe. Why? You'll find out soon, and you will probably feel similar emotions too. In 1979, an astroblem was discovered in Western Australia. This is how specialists call the ruined remains of an ancient impact crater. The site is located in the northern part of the Yilgarn Craton, between the towns of Sandstone and Meekatharra, central Western Australia. The original dimensions of the crater were quickly calculated, and they were impressive to say the least, about 70 kilometers. Its age could not be determined at that time, but it was clear that the crater is very old. And only at the beginning of the 21st century, technological advances made it possible to learn more or less the exact time of the epic event. Australian scientists from Curtin University found the minerals zircon and monazite at the base of the crater. They were formed at the time of the fall of the celestial body. Such crystals, which are formed during impact under conditions of extremely high pressures and temperatures, are called impact crystals. The results of uranium-lead isotope age determination of impact crystals showed that Yarrabubba is 2.229 billion years old. It became immediately clear that this was at least 200 million years older than any other crater on Earth. It was already a reason to pop some champagne, because a new winner had risen to the podium of the oldest impact crater on the planet. But that was just a prelude to the absolutely amazing conclusion the scientists drew. Chris Kirkland, a professor at Curtin University, one of the authors of the study, reported in the official press release, "We now know that the crater, was formed at the very end of the early Proterozoic glaciation, when most of the planet's surface was covered with ice and oxygen was actively accumulating in the atmosphere and oceans." Another author of the study, Nicholas Timms, lifts another veil of surprising discovery by adding, "The age of the Yarrabubba event coincides with the end of a series of ancient glaciations. After the impact, glacial deposits are not present in the rocks for 400 million years. This suggests that the powerful impact of the meteorite may have affected the global climate." This cautious and diplomatic statement actually reflects a stunning conclusion. Here's the thing. Scientists confidently agreed that the asteroid impact struck a glacier-covered landscape. The impact formed a crater with a diameter of 70 kilometers, and a huge amount of ice was vaporized into the atmosphere. Numerical modeling showed that the impact event of this scale released about 1 trillion tons of water vapor into the atmosphere. The authors believe that this was enough to change the climate on the planet and take it out of the glacial state. And indeed, the age of the Yarrabubba crater precisely matches the time when the glacial deposits disappeared. Just think about it. One of the most severe ice ages in the history of the planet did not end by itself. The trigger was the fall of this celestial guest. It would seem to be a catastrophic event, but it literally revitalized the planet, brought it out of its icy anabiosis. This is how outer space draws its whimsical strokes on the body of our planet, and nature makes real masterpieces out of them. But it is not only nature that draws giant figures on the body of Australia. How about this? This is a photo from orbit, taken by NASA's Landsat 8 satellite. How? Does Australia really have its own equivalent of the Nazca Desert, with bizarre man-made geoglyphs of enormous size? Were they also created by an ancient civilization in who knows when age? Not really, but there are enough mysteries in this artwork too. This story began on June 26, 1998. An ordinary pilot of an ordinary private plane was flying from the small Australian town of Coober Pedy to the tiny village of Mari. Suddenly, the pilot noticed something that made his eyes literally pop out of his head. On a deserted plateau, 60 kilometers away from Mari, there was a giant figure of a man. The plane was flying at an altitude of 3,000 meters, and the figure seemed huge even from such a great height. Of course, the first thing the pilot did when he landed was reporting about this amazing find. And naturally, it caused a great interest, which was fueled by the fact that the giant pattern was not far from the prohibited area of Woomera. You may wonder, what's a prohibited area? Be patient. You will learn that and other things soon. In the course of the investigation, it was found that the figure has 2.7 kilometers, 1.7 miles in height, a perimeter of 28 kilometers, 17 miles. Against this background, even the largest figure of the Nazca Desert, with its 100 meters, looks tiny. The figure resembles a native Australian holding a boomerang or a stick. In any case, some kind of a hunting tool. At least that's what the researchers concluded. The outlines themselves are made in a similar way as Nazca figures, with grooves of 20 to 30 centimeters, 7.9 to 11.8 inches in depth, except that the lines are much wider, up to 35 meters, 115 feet. The figure was named Mari Man, simply by the name of the nearest settlement. Along with this, the object was given a second name, Stewart's Giant, after the Scottish traveler John McDougall Stewart. Quite quickly, it became clear that the geoglyph is not an antiquity. It was created quite recently, but no one could understand and explain who created it and why. Dick Smith's team worked on this question for 2 years. A solid monetary reward was even offered for any useful information, all to no avail. Despite the fact that it is one of the largest geoglyphs in the world, perhaps even second only to the Sajama lines, its origin remains a mystery. No one is claiming responsibility for its creation, not even to at least tickle vanity. And no eyewitnesses have been found, despite the entire scale of the complex and time-consuming process required to form the huge outline on the plateau. It was speculated that the picture was created by the indigenous people of the local tribe, but only hypothetically. The only thing that has been reliably determined was the period during which the geoglyph was created. Satellite surveys helped here too. Take a look at these two images. The first one was taken by NASA's Landsat 5 satellite on May 27, 1998. The second was taken on June 12th of the same year. Surprisingly, the mysterious creator kept within a very short period of time, so the satellite didn't capture the very process of creating the Maury Man, but only the result. Anyway, despite all the apparent modernity, the object was immediately monetized by the locals through tourists. By 2013, the lines were severely erased due to erosion and became barely visible. In August 2016, local entrepreneurs, concerned about the loss of the tourist site, decided to restore the vanishing geoglyph. Using accurate GPS coordinates of the original and a construction grader, they redrew the Maury Man anew. It took them 5 days. To make the renewed geoglyph last longer, the restorers made ridges to trap water and promote vegetation growth. Eventually, they hope the vegetation will make the lines of the design green. So now this geoglyph is actually a remake of a novelty, but we diplomatically call it restoration. And it seems that its origin will remain a mystery. But Australia is full of other amazing mysteries, and now we're going to unveil one of the most discussed ones for you. There is an incredible amount of conspiracy theories in people's minds regarding all the oddities associated with the many restricted areas. Australia does have them, and lots of them. And soon we will tell you about them in this video and even show them to you. But we should start with the most evident thing which puzzles so many people. What are these strange fences that stretch across the entire Australia from end to end for thousands and thousands of kilometers? Indeed, Australia has set another record in this respect. It is here that the longest fence in the world is located, as long as 5,614 kilometers. And it really once protected the continent from a terrible threat. What was that threat? Foreigners? Aliens? No. Worse, rabbits. And it's not even that much of a joke. When 24 rabbits were released into the wild in Australia in the early 19th century, their population began to grow rapidly. The notorious fertility of rabbits was in full swing here. Very quickly, the first 24 rabbits became 600 million. These cute little fluffy animals proved to be a devastating disaster for the continent. They destroyed not only crops, but all the vegetation they could find to eat. In 1859, construction of the first fence began. The fence cut off the crowded, fertile southeastern part of the country, where Melbourne and Sydney are located, from the harsh, arid part of the mainland. It didn't help much, since rabbits are known for their hopping and digging skills. Eventually, the rabbits were overcome, but it was not without the use of a real biological weapon. In 1950, after research conducted by Frank Fenner, the myxoma virus was introduced into the rabbit population. Samples were brought specially from South America. It's an acute viral disease that affects hair-like mammals. And it's a terrible disease, it should be said. It is characterized by purulent conjunctivitis and formation of tumors in the areas of the head, anus, and external genitalia. The disease inflicts very heavy economic damage to rabbit breeders all over the world. But in Australia, it was embraced in all senses, despite its cruelty. But back then, the attitude to such issues was much more practical. Nowadays, people try not to recall these methods. Interestingly, a few surviving rabbits developed genetic resistance to the virus, so that by 1991, the population had recovered to 200 to 300 million. However, rabbits were not the only problem, and fences stretching for many thousands of kilometers were built not only against them. Dingo dogs caused great trouble. Wild dogs eat everything from fish to sheep and pose a threat to livestock farmers. So, to protect the precious fertile land from dingoes, The fences that had been built against rabbits were joined and modified. The flimsy mesh structure was upgraded, and the height of the fence was increased. The fence was completed by the mid-20th century and was called the Dingo Fence. It is also sometimes jokingly called the Great Australian Wall, and this project has already proven to be a success. It costs about $10 million a year to maintain the fence, far less than the losses from wild dogs that preyed on domestic cows and sheep. A fee to fund the salaries of maintenance and patrol workers is collected from the herders. The patrolman's duties include identifying not only damage, but also dug holes made by the rabbits. Therefore, combined with the increased height of the fence, the rabbit problem was also eventually somehow solved. This is the real story of the mysterious 1,000-kilometer fences in Australia. This is not the story of some unknown areas where strange things happen, but only the legacy of a difficult and extremely dramatic period of life of settlers on the southern continent. But don't be disappointed. There are some truly restricted places in Australia. These are really prohibited areas where access to which is either forbidden or even literally dangerous for mere mortals. And there are plenty of such places in Australia. The official reasons for prohibitions are, of course, quite ordinary. They include concern for the health and life of tourists, environmental protection, protection of sacred places of indigenous peoples. But this only stirs up the interest of inquisitive travelers. And now you will find out what these mysterious prohibited areas are. An ordinary person has almost no chance to see them up close, but we will try to give you this chance as much as possible. Heard Island. This little-known landmass, located in the southern Indian Ocean, halfway between Australia and South Africa, is home to incredible wildlife, including 3 species of seals, 4 species of penguins, and 2 endemic bird species. But that's not the most interesting part. Volcanoes and glaciers are clearly not what you expect to see in Australia, because they cannot be found there on the mainland itself. They're just further south, on the islands, and unfortunately, you won't have the opportunity to visit this wild and remote island, one of Australia's most spectacular hidden places. Access to the inhospitable sub-Antarctic island, home to the country's highest and most active volcano known as Big Ben, is strictly limited so as not to harm the animals. Along with the McDonald Islands, it has been included on the UNESCO list. Visits are strictly regulated. Pine Gap, Northern Territory. There are various rumors surrounding this remote and hidden Australian-American military base located in the central Australian desert southwest of Alice Springs, up to and including legends related to the notorious Area 51 in the U.S. The area is officially called Joint Defense Facility Pine Gap, and it is completely closed to everyone except officials and military personnel. What goes on there is a carefully protected secret. This total secrecy even inspired Netflix to make a TV series called Pine Gap. But what's going on there? All we know is that it's a U.S. satellite observation base that was launched in the 1970s. Today, it employs about 1,000 people and collects a wide range of intelligence signals, including, presumably, ballistic missile launches. Wittenoom, Western Australia. It's a ghost town. There's no official ban, and you can even visit it, but you'd better not. No, ghosts and zombies have nothing to do with it. But this place is not good for your health, to put it mildly. Wittenoom is infamous as the most polluted site in the Southern Hemisphere. The former mining town, located in the scenic Pilbara region of Western Australia, lies at the mouth of the Wittenoom Gorge. And it's not about the mines, it's about what was mined in them. Once, it was the only asbestos mine in Australia, and the town was doing quite well in the 50s to 60s of the last century. except that toxic asbestos served as a silent and slow killer of local residents. Then it was decided to stop the harmful industry. The authorities tried to close the city, making it practically inaccessible for visitors. They painted over its name on road signs and removed it from maps. However, people still continued to live in the toxic ghost town. In 2015, there were only about 6 residents who decided to stay in Whitnoo. Then, in 2019, the government purchased the last real estate properties in a compulsory and forced buyout to finally close the town. But tourists still visit the neighborhood despite explicit guidelines warning of deadly hazards. The creepy place has killed about 2,000 people. Workers and residents of Whitnoo died from asbestos-related illnesses. Look at this island. It could very well be a paradise, but in its case, appearance is a dangerous illusion. This tiny white sand island near Fremantle in Western Australia is home to more than 400 tiger snakes, an exceptionally poisonous reptile. With no natural predator enemies to regulate their numbers, the snakes actively reproduce. The reserve is also a key habitat for the rare Australian sea lion and many seabirds, including little penguins. It is possible to visit the island by boat to see the sea lions, but the inner areas of the island are completely closed because of the snakes. By the way, there is a version that snakes on the island appeared in an unusual way. According to rumors, in 1929, a man named Lindsay Rocky Vane threw his collection of tiger snakes on the island. He had previously organized snake exhibitions with various shows, but after his own snakes fatally bit his wife and assistant, snake shows were banned in Western Australia. Vane decided to get rid of his dangerous pets that way. But whatever the real reason, it's best not to set foot here. This island is the complete opposite of the previous one. Many of you already recognize it, don't you? This cute heart-shaped formation near the Whitsunday Archipelago in the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park has become one of Australia's most famous attractions. It's listed in numerous travel brochures, but you won't be able to see it up close. Hart Reef has a status of strict protection, so it is forbidden to swim or snorkel near it. At most, you can circle overhead to admire it on a helicopter tour. Arnhem Land is a very picturesque place with a rugged coastline, remote islands, wild rivers, tropical forests, rising cliffs, and savannas. It is quite a vast piece of land, over 37,452 square miles in the far northeastern edge of the Northern Territory. Arnhem Land has a population of about 16,000 people. These are indigenous Yolngu people. They mostly live here in small settlements. The island is rich in cultural artifacts. It was here that the didgeridoo musical instrument, with its unique rumbling sound, was invented. The government has decided to preserve these places as much as possible and protect them from civilization. Access is possible only with a special permit. From scenic and carefully preserved nature, we return to the harshness of the military routine. This sandy barrier island near Queenscliff has a long history of military use. As early as the 1870s, a fort was established here to protect the entrance to Port Phillips Bay from possible invasions. It was used as a depot for sea mines in World War I and as a training ground since World War II. No one knows exactly what is going on at the Swan Island military base currently. Rumor has it that the Australian Special Forces are conducting counter-terrorism training here. Whatever is going on there, you have no chance to visit this top-secret facility. But you can see it from afar and let your imagination run wild. And now, finally, a totally closed, restricted, and prohibited area that is not only forbidden to enter, it's even forbidden for civilian aircraft and private planes to fly over it. This is the Woomera Prohibited Area, part of the huge Australian Defence Force training ground in South Australia. Notably, there is a point of attraction for tourists made here, just like near Area 51. There is a missile park in the town of Woomera where you can look at all the lethal stuff that was developed right here during the arms race. But that's it. You can't even drive on the Stewart Highway, which divides the area in half. The vast 47,000 square mile area was once used as a British-Australian nuclear test site. That's the end of our tour through the most forbidden and sometimes even very dangerous areas of Australia. And it should be noted that this is only a part of the prohibited sites. Summarizing our trip, let's say the obvious. No matter how much conspiracy fans would like the opposite, Australia, of course, exists. But it is a completely different, fragile, and incredibly beautiful world. If there is any place to see what another inhabited planet would look like, this is the best destination.